It was a regular Saturday afternoon at the Oakwood Plaza Mall, a sprawling hub of commerce in Lexington, Kentucky. Families strolled along, kids tugged at their parents' hands, and the faint aroma of pretzels and cinnamon wafted through the air. For most, it was an ordinary day, that is, until someone extraordinary walked in. A man in a sharp black blazer and jeans stepped through the automatic doors near the food court, his face unmistakably familiar, drawing quick, curious glances. He wore sunglasses and, more notably, a bright red MAGA hat that clashed starkly against the polished air of the mall. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that Elon Musk?" A teenage boy standing by the fountain squinted, his phone already out to snap a picture. "It can't be," his friend muttered, though he too was already recording. "Why would he be here?" Within minutes, patrons began to cluster discreetly, their conversations punctuated by gasps and speculative murmurs. The man appeared unfazed, strolling past stores like he had all the time in the world. He even stopped to inspect a display of drones at an electronics kiosk, his expression unreadable behind the reflective lenses. Meanwhile, in the mall's central office, John Whitaker, the manager, was wrapping up a routine briefing with his staff. Known for his no-nonsense demeanor and commitment to maintaining the mall's family-friendly image, John was meticulous about enforcing the rules. One of those rules: no political displays of any kind, especially in such a public space. A knock interrupted his meeting. It was Nancy, one of the security supervisors. "John, you might want to come out here," she said, looking more animated than usual. "We've got a bit of a situation." "What kind of situation?" John asked, already rising from his chair. Nancy hesitated. "Well, Elon Musk is here, or someone who looks just like him, and he's wearing a MAGA hat." John blinked. "You're joking." "I wish I was," Nancy replied. By the time John reached the main floor, a small crowd had formed. People craned their necks and whispered to one another, their phones capturing every second. The man had made his way to the bookstore, where he now thumbed through a book about artificial intelligence, ironically titled, "The Future We Build." John's jaw tightened as he approached, his polished loafers clicking against the tiled floor. "Excuse me, sir," John began, keeping his tone even but firm. "Can I have a word with you?" The man turned slowly, lowering his sunglasses. His face, if it wasn't Elon Musk's, was an uncanny likeness. The crowd hushed. "Yes," the man said, his voice calm but carrying a subtle authority. John glanced briefly at the hat. "I'm going to have to ask you to remove the hat or leave the premises. We have a strict policy about maintaining a neutral environment here." The man raised an eyebrow, as if mildly amused. "Interesting policy," he said, not moving an inch, "but I'm afraid I have no intention of removing the hat." The murmurs among the onlookers grew louder. A few began recording the interaction more openly. John could feel the weight of their stares, the phones capturing every word. John's radio crackled as he called for additional security. Within moments, 2 uniformed security guards arrived. One of them, a tall, burly man named Eric, took his place beside John, arms crossed. The other, a younger guard named Mia, looked uneasy as her eyes darted between John and the man in the red hat. The man stood his ground, calm and composed. He didn't fidget or shift. He simply waited, his expression unreadable but faintly amused. "Tell me something, Mr. Manager," he said, his voice low enough that John had to lean in slightly to hear. "Is this really about the hat, or is it about who you think I am?" John's breath hitched for a fraction of a second. It was a sharp question, one that hit harder than he expected. He straightened, trying to maintain his composure. "This isn't personal, sir," John said, his tone clipped. "Rules are rules." The man's smile faded. He tilted his head slightly as if considering something. Then, in a tone that was calm but edged with defiance, he said, "No." Eric reached for the man's arm, but the man took a step back, his voice rising just enough to be heard clearly over the crowd. "You're going to forcibly remove me? Go ahead, let the world see." The crowd erupted into chaos, some cheering him on while others gasped, their phones capturing every second. A few began shouting at the security guards to back off, while others defended the mall's policy. Mia looked nervously at John. "What do we do now?" she whispered. John hesitated, weighing his options. The situation had become a public relations nightmare. No matter what he did, someone would be angry, and the incident would be plastered all over social media by nightfall. Before he could respond, the man raised a hand, signaling for silence. The crowd gradually quieted, their attention glued to him. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," the man said, his voice calm but firm. You're just doing your job, enforcing policies, maintaining order. I get it. But sometimes the rules we cling to do more harm than good. The murmuring stopped. Phones stayed poised, recording every word as the crowd swelled even more, spilling into the nearby corridors and stores. Some employees leaned against counters, riveted, while others stood in their shop doorways, captivated. The man turned to John, gesturing lightly. You're just doing your job, but first, let me finish. John bit back a retort and crossed his arms, motioning for the man to continue. The man took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the sea of faces. Imagine this. You see someone walking down the street wearing something you disagree with. Maybe it's a hat, maybe it's a shirt, maybe it's just the way they look. You feel uncomfortable, so you decide they shouldn't be allowed in your space. You tell yourself it's about principles, about protecting others from discomfort, but really it's about fear. Fear of what they represent, fear of what you don't understand. The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Some people nodded subtly while others shifted uncomfortably. The tension was palpable. A voice from the crowd suddenly cut through the silence. But why the hat? Why here? It was a young woman in a striped sweater, her phone still aimed squarely at the man. He smiled faintly, acknowledging the question. Good question. I'll get to that, but first. He turned back to John. Tell me something, Mr. Manager. What do you think people are really afraid of when they see this hat? John hesitated, caught off guard. It's not about fear, he said, choosing his words carefully. It's about keeping this mall neutral, like I said. Politics don't belong here. The man raised an eyebrow. Neutrality, huh? Interesting concept. But neutrality isn't silence, it's action. It's letting people coexist even when it's uncomfortable. The crowd murmured again, the volume rising. A few people clapped softly, though most were still unsure where the man was going with his point. Social media comments began to flood the live streams with opinions ranging from outrage to admiration. John opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it up, his expression solemn. This is why I'm here. The crowd surged closer, trying to catch a glimpse, phones zooming in to capture every detail of the crisp document in his hands. John's stomach tightened as he squinted at the paper, trying to make out the words. What is it? Someone shouted from the back. The man's expression softened, and his voice dropped slightly, forcing everyone to lean in. It's a letter, he said, unfolding it slowly. From a young woman who works here. She wrote to me asking for help, and that's exactly why I came. The crowd erupted into whispers, their curiosity reaching a fever pitch. A letter from someone at the mall? The idea seemed almost absurd. People exchanged confused glances while still clutching their phones, eager not to miss a second. John stepped closer, his arms crossed defensively. A letter? What does that have to do with you or with this situation? The man unfolded the paper completely, glancing at it briefly before raising his gaze to the onlookers. His tone softened, carrying a weight of sincerity. This letter is from a young woman named Kaylee. She's 21, works at the food court, and dreams of going to college one day. A gasp rippled through the crowd. In the back, a girl in a green apron holding a tray of napkins froze. Her face turned pale as she recognized her name. Oh no, she whispered, her hands trembling. She wrote to me, the man continued, because her mother's medical bills are crushing her family. She's been working 2 jobs just to help keep the lights on, and despite everything, she's still trying to save enough for community college. The crowd's energy shifted, the tension of confrontation giving way to something more profound. Empathy. Even John felt the knot in his stomach loosen, replaced by a flicker of unease. But what does this have to do with you? John asked, his voice quieter now. Why would she write to you? The man smiled faintly, his eyes meeting John's directly. Because she believed I could help, he said simply. She didn't ask for money, by the way. She just asked for advice. Advice on how to balance her dreams with the weight of her family's struggles. She thought maybe I could give her some guidance. Kaylee, still frozen in the back, tried to hide behind the soda machine, but the crowd had already spotted her. Several people turned toward her, pointing and whispering. Her face burned with embarrassment. Musk called gently, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her. Kaylee, you don't have to hide. Come here. She hesitated, her heart pounding, her co-workers nudging her forward, whispering encouragements. Finally, with shaking hands, she stepped into the clearing, her green apron still tied around her waist. The crowd parted to let her through. Musk smiled warmly, handing her the letter. You were brave to write this, he said. And you were right. I want to help. Tears welled in her eyes as the weight of the moment hit her. I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. Why would you care about someone like me? Musk placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with conviction. Because people like you are the reason I do what I do. You're the future, and you deserve a chance to build something amazing. The crowd broke into applause, some wiping their eyes as they watched the emotional exchange. Even John found himself clapping hesitantly, caught up in the moment despite his earlier frustration. Kaylee wiped her tears, her voice cracking as she whispered, It's $50,000. The applause erupted again, louder this time, people cheering and whistling, their earlier tensions forgotten in the wake of the heartfelt gesture. The mall echoed with cheers and applause, a stark contrast to the tense standoff from moments before. Kaylee stood in stunned silence, clutching the envelope like it was a lifeline. Her coworkers rushed to her side, patting her back and offering congratulations. The crowd buzzed with energy, everyone eager to capture this once-in-a-lifetime event on their phones. John stepped forward cautiously, his professionalism warring with the humanity of the moment. Mr. Musk, he began, his voice quieter now. I didn't know about this situation. If I had... Musk turned to him, his expression calm but firm. You didn't know because you didn't ask, he said, his tone cutting just enough to make John flinch. You saw a hat and made a judgment. I get it. Rules are rules, but sometimes rules need to bend for the right reasons. John nodded, shame washing over him as the weight of Musk's words settled in. You're right, he admitted. I was too focused on enforcing policy to see the bigger picture. I'm sorry. Musk's face softened, and he offered a small nod. Apology accepted. Just remember, people are more than what they wear or the opinions they hold. Sometimes it's worth taking a moment to understand the person behind the appearance. The crowd murmured in agreement, a few people nodding thoughtfully. Musk turned back to Kaylee, his smile returning. This is just the beginning, he said. Use this opportunity to chase your dreams, and when you're in a position to help someone else, pay it forward. Kaylee nodded, her determination growing. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hope, real, tangible hope. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's departure from the mall was as understated as his entrance. He declined interviews, waved politely to fans, and slipped away without further fanfare. But his actions left a lasting impact, not just on Kaylee, but on everyone who witnessed the day's events. The story became a viral sensation, sparking conversations across the country about judgment, compassion, and the power of small acts of kindness. Kaylee's story inspired others to share their struggles, leading to a wave of support and community-driven initiatives. In the end, what began as a confrontation over a hat transformed into something far greater, a reminder of the humanity that connects us all, even in the most unexpected places.